Hi, welcome back to Mr. Slover's Math. Today we are going to focus on factoring with ZPP. So it says you're going to be able to solve an equation using the zero product property rule. So our warm-up is getting us back into the mindset of solving equations, whether it's a one-step, like cases in letter C, or a two-step, like letter A and B. So notice when we solve these, this one was a negative, this one was a decimal, and this one was a positive. So when you solve equations, you could get any variety of solution. You could get a whole number, you could get an integer, you could get a fraction, an irrational number, it doesn't matter. Okay, positive, negative, zero, those are all options. So the zero product property, aka ZPP, if a product of two factors equals zero, then one or both of the factors have to equal zero. So if A times B equals zero, then A equals zero or B equals zero, or both. So let's see this in action. Example 1 says solve the following equations. Round to the nearest tenth if needed. So there may be times where you do have to round. And I wrote a note in here. I'm going to set my parentheses equal to zero. Right? Because that's what this says up here. If A is zero, it doesn't matter what B is. It's still going to multiply to give me zero. And vice versa. If B is zero, it doesn't matter what A is. A could be anything. As long as I multiply it by a zero, it's going to equal zero. So I'm going to take this first set of parentheses, x minus 2, and I'm going to set that equal to 0 and solve. So if I were to take 2 and plug this back in, 2 minus 2 is 0. And then I have 2 plus 4 is going to give me 6. 0 times 6 is going to give me 0. And that's what I want. I want some value that I will substitute in that will make the equation 0. So I'm going to do the same thing for the second factor, x plus 4 equals 0. Because it doesn't matter whether this factor is 0 or this factor is 0. So when I set my factor, my set of parentheses equals 0, I solve, I get x equals negative 4. So notice I have two answers, and that's what's going to happen. You'll find out tomorrow that we are factoring a quadratic equation. So we are factoring something that has a power of 2. So we're going to have two answers. Now they could be the same answer, or they could be different. But regardless, there'll be two answers. So letter B, I do the same thing. I see a set of parentheses, set it equal to 0, and I solve. I see a set of parentheses, I set it equal to 0, and I solve. So if I plug in x is 10, 10 minus 10 is 0. 0 times whatever this number is, doesn't matter, it's still going to give me 0. Same thing with the 35. If I plug in 35, 35 minus 10 is 25. And then 35 minus 35 is 0. 25 times 0 is 0. So I did what I needed to do. Here's just more examples. I'm setting each set of parentheses equal to 0. Notice on this one I got a decimal, and that is okay. Same thing on this one, I got a decimal. Now the only difference about step 2 or example 2 is now I don't have two sets of parentheses. I have one set of parentheses, and then I have something on the outside of that parenthesis. Now most of you are going to be like, well, Mr. Slover taught us to get rid of the parentheses you distribute. And yes, I'm glad you remember that. Totally true. But our goal here is to solve. Okay, if I distribute, I'm actually doing more work, and I don't want to do more work. It's already factored for me, so I just need to solve. I need to find some value that's going to make my equation true. And remember, there's going to be two different answers. So just like before, I see a set of parentheses, and I set it equal to 0. But I also need to set this 3x equal to 0. And I know that it's not in parentheses, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be in parentheses. 3x is still, I still have a variable there. If it was just 3 without the x, I wouldn't care about the 3. But because it has a variable with it, I have to set that equal to 0. So that's why I have this other equation, 3x equals 0 and x equals 0. Yes, you can get x equal to 0. Yes, that happened a lot in example 2. Don't assume that you're always going to have 0 as a solution. I just did that in example 2. So same thing, set of parentheses, set it equal to 0. There's a variable on the outside of the parentheses, set that equal to 0. Same thing for C and D. And then example 3 is just combining that all together, whether it's 2 sets of parentheses or whether it's 1 set of parentheses with a variable on the outside. It doesn't matter. So make sure that if you see a set of parentheses, set it equal to 0. Right? Even if there's only 1 set, if there's a variable on the outside, you're still going to set that equal to 0. Now, for purposes of this class, I have designed the problems for you. All of the problems I'm giving you equal 0. If they don't equal 0, then you got to set it equal to 0 first. Then you can go about solving or factoring. But once again, for purposes of this class, I'm choosing to design the problems where they already equal 0 for you. So today we focus on the zero product property rule, where you have 1 set of factors equal to 0 or both. Okay, so you get 2 different answers, or just 2 answers in general. So if you have questions, make sure you let me know. Otherwise, thanks for stopping in. Until next time.